Saturday, the 26th, I think. We left Anacortes last Saturday. We're gonna cross Cape Caution today, from the very northern tip of Vancouver Island, across Queen Charlotte Strait, basically, leaving a super cool anchorage, Clam Cove. It's 7:15 in the morning. Looks like it's gonna be a nice day out there, just a little rainy. After today, we'll be well past halfway to Ketchikan. Pretty cool.
Okay, let's back up a little and talk about all the factors that we took into account prior to crossing Cape Caution. We anchored in Clam Cove the night before, and our planned route was west of Pine Island, past Cape Caution, and into Fury Cove. First, looking at the weather 3 to 4 days prior, we saw that Friday and Saturday, March 25th and 26th, were our last 2 days of southerly winds from our 7-day stretch in which we had departed Anacortes. After Saturday, the winds were going to shift to come out of the north and then would die altogether for several days. If we wanted a relatively smooth crossing with favorable winds, we needed to make the crossing by Saturday. In order to make this date, we took advantage of the currents in Seymour Narrows and Johnstone Strait to pull a double day 2 days prior. Essentially, we traveled 70 miles in 1 day rather than the planned 35 miles over 2 days. This was outlined in the last video, although we didn't really explain the reasoning for pulling this double day. When we left on Saturday morning, the wind was coming from the southeast. We had originally intended on passing Pine Island to the west, although that would have put the wind too far behind us. To accommodate this, we transited between Pine Island and the tree islets. In addition to the wind forecast, there were 3 other variables that we were monitoring closely prior to the crossing. The first was the NOAA weather buoys. The West Sea Otter buoy was not reporting at the time we made the crossing, and actually, as of this video's publication, almost exactly a month later, it is still not reporting data. This was unfortunate and made our go-no-go decision difficult with the lack of this data. Instead, we monitored the data on the NOAA site from the Delwood buoy that is significantly further out. The challenge with this buoy is that, like I said, it is significantly further out into the Pacific and is well beyond the coastal shelf that makes the Pacific coast so challenging. But it was the only buoy we had for reference, so we used it. In the research we did prior to the crossing, we found that most people look for a significant wave height of less than 2 meters and a significant wave period in seconds longer than the wave height in feet. The larger the multiples between wave period and wave height, the more comfortable the crossing should be. For example, 3-foot waves every 15 seconds would be an extremely comfortable crossing, whereas 9-foot waves every 5 seconds would be very uncomfortable. When we left Saturday morning, the wave height at the Delwood buoy was 9-foot waves every 11 seconds. Now, this is definitely not ideal conditions, but that's where the other 2 variables come into play. The second variable that we were monitoring was the Pine Island and Egg Island lighthouse stations. And just to clarify, the translation of this data is cloudy, visibility 15 miles, wind direction southeast east 5 knots, 1-foot chop, low ocean swell from the west. When we left on Saturday morning, the Pine Island Lighthouse was reporting 20-knot winds from the southeast, 3-foot moderate chop, and low ocean swells. The Egg Island Lighthouse was reporting 15 knots from the southeast, 2-foot moderate chop, and low ocean swells. Generally, if you were looking for ideal conditions, you would not cross in 3-foot moderate chop, although the ocean swell at Pine Island was reporting low, not what the buoy was reporting, and based on what Egg Island was reporting, the chop would lessen the further into our crossing we went. The fourth factor that people generally take into account before crossing is the current. It is better to cross on a flooding tide if possible, as this will ensure the water is moving in the same direction as the incoming ocean swell. If the water is ebbing and moving in the opposite direction as the ocean swell, chop can build and make for an uncomfortable ride. Based on the timing of the tides when we crossed, we unfortunately had to cross on an ebbing tide, although we did not have any negative effect from this during our crossing. So, to sum everything up, our decision to cross Cape Caution was made based on the following information. 1. Wind was a favorable speed and direction for sailing across the Cape. 2. Although the Delwood buoy was reporting unfavorable conditions, the Pine Island and Egg Island Lighthouse were reporting low ocean swell, which made us reasonably assume that as the swell approached the Cape, it was lessening to a more comfortable wave height and period ratio. 3. Even though the chop at Pine Island was listed as moderate, it seemed that once we were clear of Pine Island and the Storm Islands, the chop would lessen. Conclusions. Although I lost sleep the night before, stressed about the crossing, the conditions were as we expected. A little choppy around the islands, and then smooth ocean swell across the Cape. It was a great first experience crossing the open ocean in our boat. Ben, on the other hand, did you lose any sleep before crossing Cape Caution?
No.
Were you nervous?
A little, but not terribly.
Huh. Lucky him.
Mm-mm.
We're going around Pine Island where the ocean swells meet the chop from Queen Charlotte Strait. It's really actually not as bad or uncomfortable yet. It might get worse, but as the Strait of Georgia.
They were more, the sets were closer together in Georgia.
Yeah.
It's a little more gentle.
Yeah, well the rollers are helping, I think. Probably still not ideal conditions for most people. We're sailing, we're moving right along. We're going. Oh, yeah. 5 knots, 15 knots of boat speed, or 15 knots of wind. That's okay. Moving right along. Yeah, what was that about?
Storm Island over here, or the Storm Islands. That's what it says on the chart. Oops. Pretty. Lots of wave action out there. Oh, Capitan. We're earning our rum and ciders tonight.
Yeah, we are.
It's kind of, I don't know how well you can tell here. Sorry, I keep cleaning the lens.
They're pretty big.
Yeah, they're pretty big.
At least the chop seems like it's...
Yeah, we got her on the islands. Yeah. The swell, the ocean swell seems to be like every 10 seconds. And it looks like it's maybe 1.5 meters. Maybe 2 meters, but that might be a bit of a stretch. But you can definitely tell when you're in the troughs. And then you're up on top, and then you're down on the bottom. But we're about 1/4 of the way there. The wind finally picked up. 16 knots, we're going 6. with the current. We put up a pretty conservative sail plan this morning, just the mizzen sail, and then like 2/3 of the head sail unfurled. And it was pretty slow going for the first hour this morning, but it's worth it now because we don't have to go on deck or put the little sail up or do any screwing around out there in this when we're getting rocked around and stuff. We can just sit in here with our little hand warmers and watch the waves go by.
Coming in from Cape Caution, made it around the point. We were able to sail almost the entire way, but the wind quit on us at about 6 miles out, so took the sails down, started motoring. Probably could have sailed a little bit longer, but because the swell coming in from the Pacific was pretty big, it was hindering us. It was making the sail, I'm trying to zoom in here, but it was making the sail flog, flapping. That gets tiring. So now we're coming into Fury Cove.
Here we are in Fury Cove, which is part of the First Nations people's land, I believe. The park is closed. I don't know if you can see, there's little red signs everywhere. The whole thing is closed. It sure is pretty though. Nice spot to hide out. I don't think I'd want to be here if there were southerly winds, but it looks like we're gonna have a couple days of northerlies. We might stay here. We might try and beat up wind a couple of short days tomorrow and the next day to Fancy Cove, from Fury Cove to Fancy Cove. But we crossed across Cape Caution, and that was great. We had the wind on our beam most of the day, moving right along under full sail, and then it just went ahead and quit. The last hour today, the wind just quit, which is about the worst feeling in the world, where you're almost to your anchorage
For Ben.
and the wind stops and you have to motor. And I mean stops, like it was blowing 1.5 knots when we got in here.
We knew that was going to happen, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose so.
Should have got up earlier.